Nick, what is the biggest issue, in your opinion, facing Ward 1 today?
Well, for starters, I'm deeply concerned about the future of the tax formula. I think that is something that we should take a careful, deliberative process to decide. It shouldn't include big changes overnight to residents, and we should also be looking to what other like cities have done in our situation, the post-industrial cities that have legacy costs. So the two-tier system that was proposed, something I stand firmly against. I believe that we should, well, for starters, that the logic can't include a system that pits one neighborhood against another neighborhood, or that unfairly penalizes the east side.
So this is something that happened last year. They were trying to get a tiered tax system through the budget. It did not pass, but this year the City Council has a study commission that I believe meets for the first time this week to study the possibility of a tiered or progressive tax system. So it's going to be a little bit more deliberate this year. Is there any scenario in which you could support a progressive tax system?
No. The logic, not if it's done geographically, the logic implies that just because there might be some people on Blackstone Boulevard, for example, that might have the resources to pay extra taxes, that magically the whole neighborhood has that ability. There's a lot of retirees in our district. There's a lot of people on fixed income, a lot of people in public service, for example, teachers, etc. So no, if it's done geographically, there's no possibility I can support it.
Well, they didn't do it, it's not geographically, right? What they proposed was by the value of the property. Now, in practice,
de facto
in Providence,
geographic.
Yeah,
correct.
yeah. But it's not like they said, okay, the east side's going to pay more. They said the more higher value homes would pay more.
Well, they might not have said that explicitly, but it's not even a thinly veiled attempt to tax the east side more. The east side traditionally has spent contributes roughly half of the city's budget. I believe the last budget was about 46%, something like that. So no. Additionally, after the financial crisis, there was a major revaluation and a new tax scheme that basically targeted the east side. Some residents saw their tax bill increase upwards of 75% overnight. So I don't like the fact that that's missing from the conversation. It seems like it's absent from the memory, but it's very real for people in Ward 1.
Do you support or oppose the Fane Tower, which is in Ward 1, and why?
I oppose it. I've been critical of the Fane project on the record at several different city venues. Ordinance Committee, 195 Commission, Downtown Design Review, City Plan, etc. And the criticism I focus on is in two places. For starters, I'm a firm believer in the comprehensive plan. I am pro-development, but I also believe that we should not be changing the rules for out-of-state profiteers. And so I'm concerned about Fane because no one of any authority has answered the question, and I've asked the mayor, the commission, anybody who might be able to weigh an authoritative opinion. What happens for the precedent of future developers if you allow the Fane project to continue with the massive deviation in relief that it would be granted? So we're talking 7 stories. He's seeking 40, 42, 40-something stories. That's 7 times the height story limit. There's other relief too, but the question I have to ask that has no answer that I'm deeply concerned about is that another developer down the line might then say, point to the Fane precedent and say, I want what he got, or I want substantially less than he got, but substantially more than the comprehensive plan calls for. So I believe that in such a case, the commission, in this case, now that it's consolidated to the 195 Commission, might believe that they can treat each developer on a case-by-case basis and go about it that way. But if we're talking about $200 or $300 million on the line, I would think that the courts are going to get involved. And once the courts get involved, I'm deeply concerned that the precedent will allow future developers to deviate basically wherever they want to from the comprehensive plan.
City Council has already passed the zoning variance for them, though, right? So whether or not this tower happens, the scenario that you just suggested can already happen. A developer can say, well, they changed the zoning for Fane.
Yep, and the legislature has taken a lot away from local control, and it's not settled yet, but that was my criticism of it, and it remains in place. The second big critique I have is on the economics of it. The whole project has been masked in obscurity, and when we're talking about public land with public subsidies in one way or another, whether it's tax stabilization, tax credits, etc., I believe it should be a more transparent process. The economics of the project, are rumored to not even be potentially functional at all. I don't want to have a developer start this project, then we have a recession, for example, and the developer wants to retreat with a half-built building in its place. That would be an eyesore. And again, it's not even clear who the clientele would be and whether there's a market for it. So we don't want an empty building.
For luxury apartments.
For luxury apartments, for a market that doesn't quite exist in Rhode Island, or even in the greater Rhode Island, Boston, et cetera. Whether it's looking for out-of-state investment or out-of-country investment, I don't know. But there's a lot of unanswered questions with the economics of the project, and it stands out to me.
More than half of the former 195 land, though, is still vacant. This is one project proposed for that land. You oppose this particular project. What would you like to see on the 195 land, and what, I know a lot of it's in the state. The state has a lot of control over that land, but what, if anything, would you do to make your vision a reality, whatever that may be?
Yeah, so I've been in my 5th year on the Fox Point Neighborhood Association. My 2nd year as the Fox Point Neighborhood Association president, and one of the things that we pay particular attention to is applications on 195 on both sides of the river. So there's been projects that we've been opposed to successfully, and projects that we've been in favor of unsuccessfully. So one of the things we would like to have seen was the Spencer project, which I believe would have been on parcel 5 or 6 on the riverfront. It'd be a multi-use, upwards I think of 5-story, 4 or 5-story building, where each front facade is a front, so there's no back per se. They're all front facing. You have a centralized courtyard. You have, actually perhaps most importantly, you're honoring the architectural elements of the greater neighborhood. There's a lot of historical character in and outside historical districts that were about to be honored, and that did not go through. So
multi-use, you'd like to see, would that be some residential, some retail?
Yep, a mix, so usually residential in the upper stories and some sort of a diversity of retail type uses on the bottom floor. There's another project, parcel 7 or 8, I forget the exact map in front of me, but close to the 195 highway behind El Forno and the Shell station. There's a project underway that we also supported, and I personally support, that will have that rumored new supermarket going in. Same thing, you get residential on the top floors, you've got retail on the first floor, you've got parking incorporated in the plan, and a much needed supermarket.
Moving to nightclubs and nightlife safety, the City Council is currently considering 3 nightclub reforms. One would change the closing times to 1 a.m. in certain zones, another would require video surveillance in clubs, and a third would codify specific penalties for offenses, from fines to suspensions to closures, and repeated offenses. Do you support 1, 2, or all of these ordinances, and what are your ideas for improving nightlife safety in Providence?
Well, for starters, I think the system is broken. I think that I like the work of this current Board of Licenses, but there's a culture and a history there of a lot of malfeasance. I think a lot of it comes down to resource shortages. So, for starters, the Board of Licenses might review a bunch of criteria for a licensee application, but after that process, the follow-up or follow-through really isn't there, and it comes down to inspectors. It comes down to it basically falls upon police, who are overburdened with other issues. So, asking police to start to inspect closing times or certain elements like that has been unreasonable. So, I don't like the system where this is more of an issue on Federal Hill and around town, where there's a restaurant that's given a restaurant BV license that after hours, after 10, the tables go away, the chairs get tucked away, and it's a de facto nightclub. And what happens there, it's a quality of life issue in several different ways. It's a noise issue, it's a public safety issue. Nightclubs with a nightclub license, the VX license, they have public safety managers. There's a plan. If it's a certain amount of clients, then there's police details, that sort of thing. So yeah, anything that we can do to move towards, first off, we need a standardized system. 2, to protect certain districts that don't want that 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. closing or de facto nightclub where it's supposed to be a restaurant, I'm definitely in favor of.
What do you think of the ordinances that are before the council right now that, depending on how long they take to work through, you may or may not end up voting on?
Yeah, well, I'm a fan of all changes that are towards increasing nighttime economy safety. I think there's a long way we can go for it. I think we're a capital city, though, so depending on which particular districts are going to be affected, 1 a.m. may or may not be appropriate. I did not like a regime where all clubs got out at the same time, and you had, you know, a nucleus of people that have just left the clubs all at once. So staggering hours may or may not be answered by districting.
How would you improve Kennedy Plaza, which is in Ward 1, and make it a place where, you know, it's safer for people to go, that it's more desirable for people to go and use public transportation? Yeah,
it's an ongoing conversation, and it's a difficult one. We do not want to be shunning people from downtown Providence. There is an economic consideration there with certain populations that use that. I don't personally believe that the system works where if you're in Warwick and you want to go to Cranston, you have to get on a bus to Kennedy Plaza first. So I think there's a lot we can do to alleviate some concern there by changing the way we think about busing. So bus rapid transit comes up a lot. That could be a way to alleviate some concern. And also I would be a fan of decentralizing it, not in full, but in part.
The city, I know, is working on like a total makeover of Kennedy Plaza, but they don't have a design yet. They're going to be soliciting input. What would you suggest to the mayor if he asked you, hey Nick, you know, how should we make over and redo Kennedy Plaza?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I think they did this not that long ago by investing money in new bus stops, and then they had to redo it by putting in bus stops that were actually enclosures from the elements. It's a difficult question, and I would say that if we would remove some volume from Kennedy Plaza, we can make a lot of strides. I do like the fact that we've got a lot of good public amenities right in Kennedy Plaza. We have the park, we have the children's playground, we have the skating rink, but more work needs to be done, especially on the sheltering part. It's fresh in my mind because it's 21 degrees out there today, and that's no fun waiting for a bus.
The Jewelry District Association has opposed some of the new two-way bike lanes in Ward 1. This is part of the Great Streets Plan. It's, you know, narrowing the streets to put in two-way bike lanes that are separated from cars. The goal is to make it, bicyclists are a fan. They say it makes it safer, can connect more streets within the city for people to use for bike lanes, but the opposition from some people in your ward has been that it is problematic for traffic and first responders getting through. What is your stance on all of that? So
first off, I don't understand why the city of Providence is not more bike friendly than it is. There are much bigger cities like Washington, D.C., like Seattle that are substantially more bike friendly. And in my opinion, it takes a change in the culture. You have to encourage people to want to participate in the bike economy. We are overly reliant on cars. And that comes up a lot of different ways. It's interrelated to things like development. Development seems to be, in the Foxway neighborhood especially, one that doesn't necessarily plan for a lot of the parking impact. So that's something we need to consider. And I think that if we encourage more of a bike culture, we could alleviate a few things like traffic congestion and parking shortages. So on the bike, I think the mayor's plan to incorporate some of those bike plans is a good first step. I mean, I know it's not popular with everybody. It is a change. It is sometimes disruptive. But if we can get, whether it's two-way bike lanes or not, if we can get to a place where where drivers are used to having bikes on the road, and that people are used to or want to participate in the bike economy, I think that's great. Okay, so the lanes that are currently being put in Ward 1, or they might actually be finished by now? Yes, some are. Yes, I am in order bike lanes, yeah. If you had a choice, what committee would you like to serve on the council? I like the ordinance committee. That seems to be a lot of the work, advocacy that I've been in and around the conversations I've at Fox Point has a lot that goes in front of the ordinance committee. I think the finance committee is a pretty good place too, and that's a big one, so that might be a good start. And finally, what is one piece of legislation you would like to see the General Assembly pass that would affect Providence? Oh, interesting. Well, first off, I don't want enabling legislation for the tiered tax system. I think that's first and foremost. Secondly, affordable housing. This is a big one. I think that neighborhood gentrification is a buzzword with a lot of negative connotations to it. It displaces a lot of people from neighborhoods or clusters that have traditionally been family homes or multi-generational places to live for a long time. And we don't really plan very well on where those people are going to go. So affordable housing is a great goal for developers and development. The problem is that it needs public support because you can't make developers develop affordable housing, and money goes where it's treated best. So I think if a lot more support from the General Assembly for urban areas, especially affected by gentrification, would be a great first step.
Great. Nick Cicchitelli, Democratic candidate for Ward 1. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, though. Thanks for having me.